you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. So, I hope the presentation works, and I hope that I will make it on time. We'll use the timer. Okay. So, we have heard already the presentation on the demographic challenges, and I think a lot of things in this area are quite clear, and we are pretty aware of the situation we are in. So, my presentation will start from the economics in terms how this issue is addressed by economists, because there are some important points that are, in my opinion, not pretty popular and well known. That is why a sort of introduction will be done to this. So we live in the times of, and as I said, it was, I think, pretty well presented earlier, after these two transitions, demographic transitions, and we face, I think, to large extent, the challenges within demography that were unknown to former generations, and maybe to some extent unknown in the world history. So we have the substantial shift in the size and age composition of the societies, and it's quite interesting that it used to be described that it's the Western problem. It has been a Western problem for last decades, but these days we see that it's not only the Western problem. And when I say West, I'm thinking also about Central Europe as being part of the West, which is, of course, subject to discussion in different dimensions, but let's put it simple. And good news is that economists start to see that demography is important, yes, which was not the fact 10 or 20 years ago. For example, most growth models still assume that population is constant, yes. It becomes to change slightly, which is good news. But what's the story? And why still economists, and it has to be said, most of economists, still don't really worry about demography? It's good to see that there has been, and there are three ways of seeing the demographic challenges within economics, and these are three kinds of attitude towards the population growth. First of them is called the pessimistic theory, which means that population growth limits economic development. So population growth is bad for economy. Yes, and these are the books, I think, that are pretty known: The Population Bomb, The Limits to Growth, which were like alarming in the 70s and 80s about this problem, is that if we don't start to reproduce, we will all die. The second is the neutral theory, and these are economists which say, well, in fact, demographics doesn't matter. Yes, we have so many economic tools and solutions that no matter how the demography will look like, we will get by. So this is the second approach. And the third approach is the one that we call the optimistic theory, and I will talk about it a little bit more, which was developed and pretty well illustrated by such economists as Julian Simon, Herman Kahn, Esther Bosrab, Deepak Lal. In India, for example, a lot of economists in this optimistic theory area were working and writing pretty interesting things. And now, short comparison. We are today in the 2023 and we have the fragment of Global 2000 report to the President, this pessimistic theory. If present trends continue, the world in 2000 will be more crowded, more polluted, less stable ecologically, and more vulnerable to disruption than the world we live in now. Serious stresses involving population, resources, and environment are clearly visible ahead. Despite greater material output, the world's people will be poorer in many ways than they are today. For hundreds of millions of the desperately poor, the outlook for food and other necessities of life will be no better. For many, it will be worse. Barring revolutionary advances in technology, life for most people on Earth will be more precarious in 2000 than it is now, unless the nations of the world act decisively to alter current trends. And we know that the nations acted in such a way, and it's a pretty interesting paradox that in the 20th century we started as a humanity to limit the demographic development so much that we can't stop it now. Yes, and it's true for many areas. And at the same time, the resourceful Earth, the optimistic theory, which was in fact, this fragment is a straight reply to this first fragment. If present trends continue, the world in 2000 will be less crowded, though more populated. Because crowded does not mean populated, yes? Less polluted, more stable ecologically, and less vulnerable to resource supply disruption than the world we live in now. Stresses involving population, resources, and environment will be less in the future than now. The world's people will be richer in most ways than they are today. The outlook for food and other necessities of life will be better. Life for most people on Earth will be less precarious economically than it is now. I would risk to say that rather the resourceful Earth authors were right, which does not mean that we live already in a world of paradise, yes? But the population bomb was a fake, we should say, yes? And very interesting thing, and I think very important voice in this area was given by Gary Becker, who is a very good example of economist who underwent a serious transformation. Because in the beginning, he of course is mostly recognized as a neoclassical economist, which was firstly interested in family in very economic terms. Then he, of course, we know him as the author of the human capital theory. And in 2007 he wrote, "We economists, and in particular the neo-Malthusians among us, have concentrated on a few potentially harmful effects of population growth on the economy and ignored what are often, indeed, I think usually more important positive effects. Population growth has positive effects and has demonstrated increasing returns as in the beneficial incentives to medical innovation of larger populations. Unfortunately, insufficient academic attention has been devoted to these positive effects, and this oversight should be corrected. And fortunately, some of the economists are doing what Gary Becker told should be done." And in this area of this optimist theory, we have different voices from, mostly from economics, but not only. The oldest voice, maybe not the oldest, but one of the oldest, because the oldest would be Aristotle or even some medieval economists. But this Adam Smith, classical economist, said that the most decisive mark of the prosperity of any country is the increase of the number of its inhabitants. Prosperity does not mean only wealth. Yes, prosperity is a wider term which describes what we call today well-being and wealth. Yes. And we have Ernst Fritz Schumacher, who said, from the point of view of economics, the basic concept is permanence. We must explore the economics of permanence. Any activity which in the long run leads to absurd lack of permanence cannot be economically justified. Yes, and demographic challenges show pretty well, or are some kind of criteria through which we can evaluate or judge different economic ideas. And to list the optimistic theory economies, they were pretty many, and it's not only the last 20 or 30 years, because we have few Nobel Prize laureates. Here, of course, Becker, who is also known for but stressing the role of altruism for economy. Yes, that it's not only that we are egoistic and we are effective economically. Altruism, and he thought about the family, is the huge motivation which is responsible for a large part of economic. We will go to this a bit later. Simon and Kahn, Positive Influence of Population Growth on Economy. These are two authors which I quoted. Kuznets, Innovation Potential of Human Communities. Esther Bosrab, who said that the pressure with growing population, the pressure for effective use of resources is growing, which is a kind of explanation why it's, as it was said earlier, we are about 8 billion and we still can exist. And Vogel and Costa, theory of techno-physio-evolution. And this is a very interesting thing to see. This is the graph that comes from this article by Vogel and Costa. I don't know how visible it is. We have here the years at the bottom, and we have the numbers of people. And of course, the article is from the late 90s, so we have only 6 billion people here, yes? So it was done around that time. And what's interesting that as we see this line picking up, the number of people on Earth, the speed of innovations and number of innovations is growing. Because, like, if you would see for, like, let's say 2,000 years, or let's say 1900 years, we have, of course, some very important innovations done. But in this short period of last, let's say, 200 years, we have something incredible. Yes? Why is that possible? Yes? Of course, and some of this explanation is that comes from Bosrab, that with the bigger community, bigger population, you have the bigger pressure for effective use of resources. But what's also important, with bigger population, you have the bigger pool of talents, of innovation. Yes? So this is Vogel and Costa. And context we have today of these main challenges that we face were somehow listed before. Low fertility, aging population, and growing longevity, which it has to be said, longevity is not a problem. It's an achievement, yes? And it's important to remember about it, because for ages people were living pretty short. Yeah? We live in times when we can expect, yes, to live twice or sometimes even 3 times longer than people 200 years ago, 300 years ago. But what we have is this combination of low fertility, longevity, and decrease of the proportion of the working age, which comes with aging of the population. And we have at the same time this technological developments that reshape this macroeconomic context. So we have, and it's not in social sciences, it's a situation that is normal. We have pretty complex set of factors, interactions, and so on. So we have, for example, online work and education these days, digitalization of society and economy. We are entering this AI era, robots, automation. And what is quite often neglected in this macroeconomic prognosis and analysis is the third factor, which I put here, the cultural shifts that reshape family that we talk about, reshape communities and societies. For example, individualization and defamiliarization or defamilism, as they call it. Sometimes we hear about post-familism. Yes, we are approaching loneliness pandemics. Yes, and this is something that we don't often talk loud, but we should start. And question of relationships, cyber versus real world. Yes, this is the issue that also will somehow influence society and the economy at the same time. This decreasing and aging population brings new challenges. Shrinking working age population, which puts pressure on labor markets and welfare states, the budgets, increases the old age dependency ratio, raises the per capita burden of public debt, and puts pressure on implementing technological advancements. And it seems that to sustain this economic growth, because we don't want to say, no, economic growth is, we don't want economic growth anymore. We want to sustain our standard of life. The working age population must increase, labor force participation rates must go up, and productivity has to increase through mainly technological advances. And second thing, skills development. Population aging also entails such issues as adapting our workplaces, and welfare and public health systems have to accommodate to the increased demand of services connected, for example, with this growing longevity. And it is important to look that within this field of analyzing how demography will affect macroeconomic processes, there are two approaches. First is the standard, so-called, which assumes that there's a constant age-specific behavior with respect to employment, earnings, consumption, savings, and it means that economists say, well, the human behaviors are constant, which is not true. And the second approach takes into account this behavioral, institutional, and global responses as well. And this approach adds, of course, makes the situation more complex and making prognosis more difficult. But it seems that this is the only one if we expect some real adequate measures. In the coming decades, demographics will be more favorable to economic well-being in the less developed regions than in the more developed regions. And here I have also a bit longer fragment from David Bloom, but I will skip it because the time is running out. And I want to, at the end, just invite you to look at this one proposal of seeing the interdependence and the relations between different things in terms of this demographic challenges. We have fall of fertility, so we don't look at all the challenges but fertility. When fertility falls, the demand falls, is because their markets are shrinking. If markets are shrinking, the supply falls down. If supply is falling down, we will have probably problems with keeping the workplaces, yes, because employers do not need as many employees. This means that number of marriages and families probably will fall, because to sustain the family, it's good to have a job. Yeah. It means that we will have the fall of savings. And it's interesting that some economists write, I guess it was Alfred Marshall, a long time ago, he said that the parental love is the most important stimulus for saving. We are in the middle. Increase of fall of savings mean we have the increase of debt. And because before we go to this economic and financial crisis, I would like us to look on this left and the right side. With the fall of fertility, we have increase of fixed costs of socioeconomic system. And this is something that economists don't talk about. Fixed cost crisis means that all the things we benefit from, the public communication, the swimming pool, the sanitization systems and so on, are costly, yes? And to make them, keep them working is possible because a lot of people pay taxes. If the number of people paying taxes will fall down, we will have problems with keeping the standard of living. Increase of consumerism because, and these are, there is some interesting field of evidence in economics that households, family households where live, where few people are living are more consumption effective than single households. Yes? Because some goods are used as public goods, for example. Yes, few people are using the same equipment, and in single person households, this equipment is used only by one person. And on the right side, we have the decrease of young people population. And what I said, this means that we have smaller pool of talents and innovation, and we have weaker pressure on innovation because older societies are not that interested in like breaking the new scientific barriers and so on and so on. Of course, statistically, it does not mean that older people are not innovative, but statistically, the older societies are less innovative. This is another factor for decrease of competitiveness of the economic system. And the conclusion. Dominating approach to demographic challenges puts stress on quantity, and we should also look at quality. And this is this cultural component which I mentioned. In terms of quality, these important cultural shifts make a really big difference for human capital formation, social capital effectiveness, and I think that what we see today in Western Europe with these riots and so on, it should be called the social capital crisis, yes? We have problems with cohesion, with cooperation, relationships crisis. And the problem of sending capital into future, sorry for this delay, economics quite often comes from the assumption that if we gather a lot of capital today, it will be waiting for us in 20, 30, 50 years, yes? Maybe, yes? We cannot guarantee that the value of this capital that we have today, and we want to save it for the future, that the value of this capital will be the same in the future. We only hope. So the only real way to guarantee that we will have enough resources in the future is to take care of the human capital and social capital, which means we need generations. And this is the secret of generations replacement level. If we will be able to guarantee the replacement of generations, we have bigger chances that this capital that we dream about in the future when we grow old and will retire, that will be there for us. Yes. Without this generational replacement, it can be risky. Models versus reality, this is the last slide. Quantity and quality, and long-term versus short-term perspective. The confusion in this macroeconomic prospects today is also connected with the fact that some of them are short-term perspectives, and some of the short-term perspectives are look quite nice, even though we have falling fertility, aging population, and so on. But I think that long-term perspective is what really should be interesting to us. Thank you very much.